Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 405 with Lauren Vaknine. Lauren Vaknine is a UK-based health writer and holistic wellness coach. She's also a good friend of mine and happens to be a co-author of mine in our recent Activate Your Life Volume 4 book. She's a TEDx speaker, host of the Reconditioned podcast, and so much more. She has a dramatic story of being disabled until the age of 29, and then she healed herself. And that healing and wellness has gone on to be a major part of her life mission. She's told that story of healing herself on a couple other podcasts in depth, which is a fantastic listen. This episode is like a continuation of that story. So we're going to take a deeper dive into her current world, her current frameworks of thinking, including how she thinks about health and takes care of her family, for example. And we're also going to get a bit more into the weird and magical because she and I have that in common. We are metaphysical explorers as well as practical humans taking care of our health here on Earth. So without further ado, here is Lauren Vaknine. Lauren Vaknine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So this is actually the first time that we are chatting face to face in this lifetime, but perhaps we've had lifetimes together before or something like that. There's a lot of, when you first started connecting, I was like, oh, you remind me of a friend. And there's like so many things that you just sort of have this familiar feel. And maybe that's how you show up for a lot of people. Like people just feel familiar with you. But yeah, it's really, really great to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, I think definitely we must have had other lifetimes together, as we probably know through our shamanic work that we're both engaged in and how we connected. So, but yeah, it's lovely to connect in person. I mean, in person virtually over a camera and something like 5,000 miles away, but still.
Yeah, and you're in London, is that right?
I am in London, yeah.
Excellent. So maybe you could, when you go to a festival, like you were just telling me you went to a festival last weekend and you were talking, but when you encounter someone and someone's like, well, what is it that you do? But maybe they've seen your talk or maybe before they've seen your talk or something like that. How do you describe what you do to someone that hasn't encountered you before?
Yeah, I actually always find that really challenging. And, I work with business coaches and whatnot, some of who you know probably. And it's always like trying to niche down what I do is so hard because it covers so much, because my journey has been so in depth. Essentially, I am a holistic health and life coach, but it covers really the full spectrum of human wellness. So the physical, mental, emotional, and the spiritual aspects of self. So I am that. I am a podcaster, a writer, speaker, and a mama.
Mm-hmm.
And a
wife. Yeah, thank you. And you've been teaching publicly, writing publicly for quite some time now. You found your even though you said it's tough to niche down, you sort of found your niche a while ago, right? You're decades in at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess I know my niche. It's just challenging to get it across. The business coaches will tell you, you need to tell people exactly what it is they're going to get, and you need to narrow it down to a few words. And it's like, what I do just doesn't do that. It is broad. It's not necessarily niched, for the very reason that I learned through my journey that the healing of a person requires healing the whole self, not just one part of the self. But yeah, as a result of my journey from disability to wellness, it's been decades in the making. I started, I guess, my learning journey when I was 18, when I was completely head to toe disabled. Although my parents had kind of had me in homeopathy and with spiritual healers and psychic surgeons my whole life since I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was 2. So that stuff was never out of the ordinary for me. But I guess when I really took it on myself and had this inner knowing of there must be another way and I know I can heal, that was 21 years ago. So my journey has taken me into, I guess for about 15 years now, I've been speaking publicly about holistic health, writing about it, and coaching people to make deep transformations in their own lives.
Wow. Yeah. One thing that stood out to me, what you're just saying, psychic surgeon. You went to a psychic surgeon, or your parents took you to a psychic surgeon?
Yeah. So have you ever worked with a psychic surgeon before?
I haven't. I had Karen Dark on the show, who's a UK Paralympic gold medalist. I don't know if you're familiar, but she's paralyzed below the waist, and went to a psychic surgeon in Brazil, I believe, to see if he could fix her spine. And he fixed a lot of things, but didn't make her walk again. But yeah, so I've heard that one sort of firsthand account of it, and I was, pretty intrigued.
Yeah, it was, and again, like it didn't heal me, it didn't cure me, but my whole ethos is that it's never just one thing. And I think all the things we did contributed in some way. And equally, you need to know when there's something deeper going on with your health that requires a different modality, a different way of healing, because for whatever reason, you're meant to discover it. For whatever reason, you're meant to go deeper with the learning. Like I always say, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but maybe we'll come back to it. But I always say, had I not have got as sick as I got, I mean, I literally had no use of any joint in my body, from my fingers to my elbows to my jaw to, my hips. So had I not have got that disabled, I was already used to being kind of like a semi-disabled kind of kid that could do some stuff, couldn't do other stuff. If I would have stayed at that level, I would still be there right now. I know that fully in my heart. I wouldn't have had, and I would be living like a mediocre life where I just accept and settle for this life of mediocrity, because I guess I have learned through working with hundreds of people over the years that that's kind of what society leads us to. When we all exist in this place of fine, and we should be aiming or striving for something a bit more than that. And I think had I not have got as sick as I got, I wouldn't have been pushed to find the answers. It would have just been a case of, oh, okay, this is just how it's always been. This is how it's always been. This is how it will always be. I guess I'm cool with that. But when you literally can't even sit up straight, let alone get yourself to the toilet or feed yourself food, you're like, okay, I need to do something about this, because otherwise I might as well die. And actually, I really want to live my life. So the psychic surgeons, so it was a specific person, and he's actually, I didn't know that at the time, he's now quite well known, and he channels a being called Paul of, I'm going to get it wrong, Paul of Circes or something like that. And the interesting thing was, as a child, none of these things were strange to me because I was so used to them. But when I used to go and say, yeah, my healer, he just kind of like, his whole face changes when he goes into trance, and people are like, what's trance? And his voice changed, his accent changed, but from a way that I can do accents, but I can't do that with my voice, and there is something happening that is beyond the realm of human understanding, and we have to allow enough nuance in our brains to know that there are things that we don't need to be able to explain. But when it comes to healing, you just have to have that little bit of faith. So we saw him for years, and I think that it definitely helped. Did it cure me? No. Did anything cure me? No. Many things together cured me, and I cured me, and many other practitioners and modalities all that came together. But it was an interesting part of the journey, an interesting piece of the puzzle.
And when I think of surgery, I think of like going into like a specific area in the body to like change, like a physical thing, like you get appendicitis surgery to take out that one little piece. Is psychic surgery like for a specific joint or something like that? Or how is it used?
So for some people it is. My friend's mum went to the Philippines when she had cancer to this really well-known psychic surgeon who literally performs surgery to remove tumors and remove cancerous cells psychically. For me, it wasn't that. It was, I guess that's just, I knew him as a spiritual healer. He does now call himself a psychic surgeon. But it was healing. It was trying to heal the body from whatever imbalance was there that was causing it to be so sick. What was in a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old child that was causing this level of dysregulation and imbalance. So it wasn't surgery. It was plain old healing.
What's occurring to me right now is that a psychic surgeon could operate on a smaller scale than a physical surgeon. Like you could take out a single cell, right? Or you could even take out a waste molecule from a cell, right? Like surgery could be down to the quantum level theoretically if you were operating like
absolutely.
that. So yeah, it wouldn't have to be just like make a cut, take a thing.
Yeah. I think it's far more complex actually.
Yeah. So, I've listened to you tell your story about being disabled, and it's super intense. It was super intense for me. And so I can hardly imagine. I mean, obviously you were in it, so it was like it didn't hit you all at once, like hearing your story. But maybe we could, because you've told this so well on other podcasts, and I'll put one in the show notes for this for people to like hear the longer version, the 45-minute version. But could you give us the shorter version of, and before you even do that, I know that a lot of people, they're stuck in stories of their past, and those stories still impact their decisions, belief structures, and things like that. And I'm actually curious, like, how do you tell this story without it entangling you in the present? Because it's such like a massive, weighty thing. But I see that you're largely, you're sort of above that story at this point. So I'm really curious, like, what's your process like to keep retelling the story? Because it's helpful for people to hear it, but not have it affect you.
That's the best question I've ever been asked. And I love it because what I teach first and foremost in my work, and I, trained in nutrition, life coaching, many things, NLP, CBT. The first and foremost thing that I teach, that I start with before anything else in my courses, my programs, my memberships, private work, is identity. Because when you operate from the identity of the person that, I guess, the life that isn't serving you, that becomes your reality. You know, and you probably know even more than I do about, the quantum mechanics of it and resonance and how energy transmutes. When you're existing in the energy or in the identity of disability, you are a disabled person. So it's victim consciousness versus abundance consciousness. And the key shift for me came when I decided that I wasn't going to be a disabled person. I made a choice that wellness was going to be my story, not disability. And I started trying to shift. And let me tell you, for anyone listening who's like, how did you do that? It was not easy. It was years long process, right? So I'm not in any way trivializing anyone who's in a difficult situation right now, but I made a decision. I realized that I needed to change my mentality from that of a disabled person, and that had to shift on an identity level. And if you want, I can go into what that meant for me maybe after I've given the short version of the story, so it kind of has more context. But I love that question because it's the most important question.
And do you feel currently, when you tell the story to audiences on stage or something like that, How does it impact you?
I feel like it was a different lifetime, that version of me. I think one of the biggest things that's helped me on my journey, my spiritual practice is the key to everything. But one of the kind of niches within that has been my divine feminine practice, and kind of really tapping into the idea of the kind of birth cycle that we all go through from the divine feminine perspective. And I'm aware that I have had many rebirths, first in other lives, but also in this life. And when I look back to how I was, that was a different version of me. And I'm able to kind of see it from that bird's eye view. And there are still moments, things that happen, situations, words, terminologies, memories that anchor me back to those times. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because it gives me the opportunity to do some deeper healing, to acknowledge how far I've come, and have that initiates a great amount of gratitude. And I think gratitude practice is everything. So I think that for me, I'm not existing in the identity of that person. I can acknowledge that was a different version of me, a different incarnation of me almost. And I've rebirthed many times since then, and I continue to do that. But I can also anchor to the truth of what that was for me, and still be somewhat present with that version of me without it becoming my identity.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm not sure where it makes sense to start chronologically. You mentioned being diagnosed at the age of 2, and and then you said 18 was when you decided, I'm going to be a healthy person, and started your like taking it into your own hands.
Yeah, so the very quick nutshell of the 45-minute length of time that it usually takes to tell the whole story is, yeah, I was diagnosed. I had symptoms from about 19 months old. I was diagnosed a month before my second birthday with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and my parents took me down kind of the homeopathic route. The only treatment option at the time was steroids in very high doses. When I was 15, the same pediatricians that were recommending that actually came out and apologized and said that was the wrong thing, because all the children that had been on that now had multiple deformities, joint replacements, secondary conditions. Some of them died. It's horrendous. So I'm just so grateful that my mum had this inner knowing, this guidance that she still has no idea. She knew nothing about holistic health or anything. She's just had this kind of inner compass, something, intuition guiding her towards a different alternative. And I know that, yes, I still got very, very disabled later on, but I know that you're looking at me, I look normal. I've managed to heal most of the joint damage that I had. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I been on steroids for 10, 15, 20 years, because that stops you from growing properly. It stops your hormones from developing properly. It stops everything. So that journey enabled me to have a more of a chance at healing. So yeah, as I said, we kind of went down the holistic route as much as my parents were able to, with the limited information they did have in the 80s in London without huge amounts of money. They were just putting everything they did have into taking me to a homeopath, and that was kind of the homeopathy and the healing. Didn't have that much information on nutrition, really, although my parents were Israeli. We had a Mediterranean diet. And then, yeah, I had a huge flare up when I was about 17. And so my childhood years were very kind of on and off. I would have flare ups, I would go into hospital, I would have the needs drained of fluid, I would have injections and operations in my eye, which was a connected associated condition. And then I'd have times where I was okay. Like I was never fully 100%, but I had times where I could enjoy life and just, do life with everyone else. And then at 17, I had this huge flare up. I was in performing arts school, and my knees just flared, you just swelled up. I couldn't do anything. And I was told at the same time that my eye had got really bad and I needed to go on this drug, they told me, because the eye needed to be operated on. I had cataracts basically because of the eye drops I'd been on for the eye since the age of 3. Cataracts had grown kind of one over the other, and it was pushing against the optic nerve. And the pressure had dropped, but they couldn't remove the cataracts while the inflammation was so high. So they put me on this chemo-based drug that my parents didn't want me to go on, but I made a choice that I'm now an adult and I'm going to make this decision myself. I knew nothing about what I was doing. There wasn't really, the internet was kind of just coming alive, and I didn't have any way to research it really. So within 10 months of taking that drug, where before the arthritis had only been in the knees and the ankles, it spread to every joint in the body. So by the end of that 10 months, I had no use of any joint in my body. I lost pretty much half my hair and it damaged my liver really badly. So I was really, really sick. I couldn't operate, couldn't function. I couldn't eat. I was sick. I was really sick. And at that point, my mum wheeled me into the office of my rheumatologist, and she'd been with me since I was 4. And she didn't bat an eyelid at me being in a wheelchair. And she was so matter of fact when she told us that this drug works for 70% of people and there's 30% of people it doesn't work for. And I was 18 and it was 2002. And I had no access to information like I do now. And I just had an inner knowing that there was more to medicine, more to health, more to human beings than statistics. And that was the moment I kind of started the journey very, very slowly.
Wow. Okay, a couple things stand out for me in what you just shared. The pediatricians coming out and apologizing, we just, disabled a bunch of people and maybe killed some kids. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That, I don't know, it makes me kind of angry in a way, and just like what I'm feeling is like they're not taking any responsibility. The pediatricians are not taking responsibility, like, oh, sorry, we didn't know any better. And I get that things like we are always learning and updating and improving, like in research and in practice and things like that, but I don't know, that just doesn't sit right with me, that occurred.
Yeah, I was very angry for a long time. I guess I have started taking you and your lovely wife down a little rabbit hole, but yeah, I very quickly cottoned onto the rabbit holes that I was able to go down when it came to, I guess, where the power really was. The pediatricians were kind of just being shown what was available to them to treat. And we can only heal with what we know. We can only do our job as well as the resources at the time are allowing us to do our job. So the pediatricians, was it their fault? Maybe a little bit, maybe not. Again, it's never just one thing. There was a drug being made and children were being told they need to be on very high doses of it. And the study was basically those children 15 years later. That was the study, but it's happened with countless medications and continues to happen time and time again. I mean, look at thalidomide in the 60s, the drug that deformed thousands of babies. And until the pharmaceutical companies actually, took responsibility for it. But meanwhile, thousands of babies had been born without limbs or stillborn and, the most awful things. So what responsibility are they going to take? They can give you all the money in the world. It's not going to change your situation. And I'm a firm believer that we can't exist in those dense frequencies of bitterness. I do believe in sacred rage and expressing that rage, and I did that for a long time. I also did that in not such a healthy way. When I first started learning all this stuff, I would just kind of scream about it from the rooftops, and that wasn't healthy either, because people have to come to information like this very gently, I think. So yeah, it can cause a lot of anger, and especially for the people who were disabled. I mean, I had a very, very awful experience with that one drug, But thank God that was something I was able to heal from. Had my limbs not have grown, like many of my peers that I've met over the years with arthritis, because they couldn't because of the steroids, I'd be in a very different situation right now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you mentioned, whose fault is it? And, maybe that's not even important, but it leads me to like not want to do anything, like almost like just fully trusting the body like as much as possible, like with my kids, almost being like, man, I don't know, even if I give them well-known safe medications, maybe I should just let their bodies process it and have like even more trust and faith in the bodies, because it seems like if you like tip one domino, if you like put something in the body and it starts to disrupt metabolic cycles, starts to disrupt all these things, and there's like an infinite number of downstream unpredictable effects. Which is, like we see it in ecology when we're talking about introducing a species to like clean up something, and then all of a sudden they become the invasive species. This happened in Australia when they, because it's an island, they introduced like a weevil to destroy some invasive crop, and then the weevil took over, and they're like, oh, we need to introduce the cane toad. They brought the cane toad in, and it ate all the native bugs, and now there's, just you could go into a field and step on 1,000 toads trying to walk across it, and it's like, how did we not see this coming? Well, obviously because it's a complex system.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, it's sometimes it pushes me towards just like not
Again, even with that, I think there's nuance. So I raise my children very holistically. We follow a natural immunity approach. When people say, so you do nothing, I say no. I do more than most people, right? I don't take the pharmaceutical route, but I have educated myself on what every childhood illness looks like. What does whooping cough sound like? What does croup sound like? What does measles look like? What does rubella look like? What are the first signs of mumps? So that I can catch things like that early and use all the tools within my disposal and all the amazing people around me, like my incredibly amazing homeopath, my naturopath, and all the tools that I have. I mean, my quote unquote medicine cabinet at home is not your average medicine cabinet. It's full of lotions and potions and supplements and homeopathic kits and tinctures, and it's not doing nothing, it's using nature to help the body kick back into gear. I do believe that no disease falls out of thin air. There is a cause for everything. It's not always a defined cause. There's usually multiple reasons, multiple factors, especially in today's age with so much toxicity coming from so many different places, including the mind, So I very much empower myself as a parent, especially like with myself as well, but for my children, I empower myself with knowledge on how the natural world can help me to keep them healthy and to help them heal if something does happen. And I've never for 1 second questioned or doubted that decision. I just have this deep inner knowing that is the way I'm meant to do it. Is that to say that medicine doesn't have its place? It certainly has its place in emergency care. I'm very grateful that I can rely on emergency care. I had a very traumatic ectopic pregnancy a couple of years ago. I nearly died. Had I not have been in a hospital at the time when it ruptured, I would be dead. My son broke his hand. So first time we'd ever been to a hospital with, he has no idea what doctor's surgery or hospital looks like. He broke his hand. So obviously I'm grateful for that stuff, but I don't need to be so grateful that I then go, well, they can do this, so then maybe they can do this. Again, nuance. Yes, they can do that. Doesn't mean that they're doing that right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. And, going beyond my just a moment ago, being like, I'm just going to throw everything out I know when my kids even start to get a little sick, I think like, oh, maybe I can help them with somehow, right? Like I'm gonna try to do something that's helpful. So I'm sure, yeah, we all want to like feel good because we're doing something to help, and we're looking for, the right herbs or the right whatever that can
But
support.
it's like, it can be as simple as, and yeah, like if I feel like my kids' immune systems are getting weak, it's heading into autumn here and people are getting sick. And if I feel like I can see that their immune systems are a bit weak, I've got, very, very well formulated medicinal mushroom syrups. I've got elderberry syrup. We're now foraging for elderberries. Now's the time of year to do it.
Oh,
I don't
fun.
always make, FYI, I don't always make my own because it's very labor intensive. But if I need to buy it, I buy it. We have tinctures and we have, vitamin C, and I put minerals in their water to ensure that they've got high enough mineral content, that their body's processes are going to work properly because they've got enough magnesium, allowing it to do that. I rub magnesium on their legs every other night when they're sleeping. I diffuse very high quality essential oils to, remove any pathogens from the air if there's something around that. Maybe if there's a little pathogen kind of having its way with them, but it hasn't fully come out, that maybe it will kill it and maybe it won't. Maybe they'll get sick and maybe they need to get sick in order for their immune system to develop and mature for the next level, to the next level. So sometimes it's as simple as, my child's got fever. I'm going to give him a little homeopathic remedy that will make him more comfortable, because I don't want my child to be uncomfortable, but part of fever is discomfort, and I'm not going to suppress it back into their system with antipyretics, because that's going to suppress the toxins back. So it's not that I'm doing nothing. I'm giving a little bit of homeopathy, but I'm there with them. I'm skin on skin, trying to regulate their body temperature. I'm diffusing certain oils in the room. I'm rubbing stuff on them. They've got me fully present with them. And sometimes that's all a child needs. And, so like they've got a fever for 24 hours, but when they overcome that fever, you'll always notice in a child, once they've got over a fever, if you haven't suppressed it with antipyretics, they start doing something new, they evolve and they're at that next phase. So whether they're really little and they start with a new word, or they start talking, or I noticed with my son who's nearly 8, there's just some, brain development after that, or there's some physical development. And, what we can't see that's happening underneath is we've given all the mitochondria inside the cells the opportunity to rejuvenate and rebirth. Like, wow, what an opportunity to have not put toxins in, but allowed the body to heal, to kind of remove, eliminate, purge what it needed to purge. So it's actually an opportunity.
Yeah, that was actually a new thing that I encountered from an episode of your show that you sent me, about that kids will have a growth spurt or a developmental spurt after fevers. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. When I learned that, I was like, wow, that's brilliant. So brilliant. And then I was noticing it. I mean, yeah.
Do your kids know that how you take care of them is special? Like, do they have that awareness yet?
Yeah, my son does. My daughter's 4, and she hasn't clocked on as much. My son recently, over the past year, has been saying things like, you know, mummy's so great because she can heal us, and mummy has something for every time there's something wrong with us. So like if they fall over and they get a graze, or I've got calendula cream in my bag ready to put on them, or if they've got a bruise, I've got arnica cream, and if they've got gunky eyes or something, I've got my friend makes homemade colloidal silver and I'm cleaning their eyes out with that. And so he knows that I've always got something to help him with. And he does, he says comments a lot now. I'm kind of going blank on the sort of comments, but he does, he's got like a gratitude for, he also sees that, especially in the winter, most of his friends get a lot more sick. And I think he's just gained an awareness of that recently. And I don't want to put that on him, because I also don't think that's a nice energy for him to put out. But he noticed it. So it's interesting. But yeah, my daughter not so much. She's a little bit young, I think. But he definitely has like a gratitude and appreciation for all the ways that he just knows that if something's wrong, I'm going to be able to do something to help him. And that doesn't always mean that I'm taking away his discomfort. And I think it's really important. That's an important lesson as well. I'm not giving him a strong painkiller to take away any pain. And don't get me wrong, when he broke his hand, I gave him a painkiller, right? I'm not some, crazy person that's just like, no, that's not right. I can't do that to my child. He broke his hand. Of course, I'm going to give him painkiller, but I just wouldn't give anything to bring down a fever. So, but he has an understanding I can help him. It's not always going to take away his pain, but he's being supported in a way that his body, and he loves all the things we do around nutrition and our rituals. He loves all our rituals, anything that brings us closer to nature. He loves all of it. So I think he's very connected to it a bit. He sees it's different. He knows it's different to other people. But we also have an amazing community of my friends are very similar to me. So it's not uncommon for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun for me to see, like, I have his almost 7-year-old son, and I think he's finally starting to sort of maybe talk to his friends, and like they're comparing what their families are like. And then he comes up to me and he's like, kind of gives me this look like, I'm glad that you're my dad, kind of thing. Which is, it's so nice.
Cute.
You're reminding me of my ex was a Christian scientist, and that was the first time
that cut out. She was a what scientist?
A Christian scientist.
Oh, okay.
Which that was the first time I encountered really understanding that belief system. But basically their presupposition is that any physical malady is sort of untrue, because the like fundamental nature of the universe is sort of love and perfection. So it's just like a misaligned interpretation of God, that you're experiencing a broken arm or sickness or something like that. And so they basically, they're all healers, but they're just like sort of resetting the body to perfection. And she told me this story of, they were in the wilderness on a horseback expedition, and one of the horses got its leg in a crevasse and like broke the bottom part of its leg off. And they're like, we can't go anywhere with this horse, and like it's going to stop the whole expedition, and we're going to have to bail out. And they're like, oh well, we'll just revert this horse back to its sort of pure state of beingness. And so they all gathered around and prayed, and the horse's leg unbroke itself, and they were able to continue on the way. And at the time I was like a little skeptical, 10, 15 years ago when I first heard this. But the Christian scientists are known for not using like painkillers, not, going to the hospital and things like that. But hearing the story, it's like, wow, okay, I think
you can have balance.
Yeah.
I think you can know that the body can heal, and that sometimes it needs a little bit of help. And also we cannot be stupid about it. Like if my son's broken his hand, I'm going to give him a painkiller, and I'm going to take him to the emergency room. And I'm also going to speak to my shaman and my homeopath and the rest of it, and find other solutions as well. So like it's just always multifaceted. I think that doesn't mean that in terms of, I do believe that the body can heal itself. For example, the imbalance of cancer and what cancer is and how we've been taught to fight cancer. Cancer is an imbalance in the body that requires a deep healing, not an attack on the body. So that would be my personal approach, not to attack the body when it needs the most healing. And I think cancer also requires a deep level of emotional healing. So, but I just think that there can be a bit of balance. And most people would call me extreme, but I'm not extreme as that, where I wouldn't give my kid a painkiller, or if they'd broken a bone or something, and maybe I'm just not as evolved and not able to unbreak his hand in that moment. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I want to put a pin there, because I wanted to ask you about your thoughts of medicine in the future and where we're headed. But in your initial story, there's something I wanted to go back to, where you talked about your mom's inner guidance around let's go homeopathy. Let's look into this. And that's super impressive for anyone to go against, what most people are telling them. And I think it might be getting easier. Like we're celebrating the Mavericks a bit more, but back in the day, it's like, I think probably in the 80s, a lot of people really just trusted their doctors to provide them with the solution. So, how did your mom, how was she able to successfully listen to her guidance system?
Honestly, the older I get, with every passing year, the more I look at her and I think, how did you do that? It just amazes me how strong she was. I honestly don't know. She doesn't really know. She just said that she was, and let me be clear, she had no education on her. She had no education at all. She left school at 15 to go and work because her parents needed her to work. My dad, the same. My dad's from Morocco. Like he left school at, I don't know, 14, and he was the oldest of 10 children and went and worked 3 jobs. That was, then went to the army, that was, so they're not these people that were around, maybe from very affluent upbringings, people are around this stuff and get exposed to it. They weren't exposed to it. So my mum was exposed to spirituality. Her parents were spiritualists and were in a spiritual circle in the 50s, which is super rare, in these circles anyway. But she just said that when they told her that the only option is steroids, and they gave it in really high doses, and their theory was that if we give it really high doses really early on, it will knock it on the head. And it just didn't ring true to her that that was the truth. I don't even think, knowing my mum now, that she even knew the right questions to ask. Like, what's the long-term prognosis? What are all the side effects to these medications? All the questions that I would know to ask now, having been in the medical world for such a long time. I don't even think she knew that. But what she did was she came away. She didn't make a decision based on fear. She said, let me think about it. Something doesn't feel right. And she took herself to the library. And she spent 3 days in the library and emerged from there after 3 days deciding on homeopathy. And there were 3 things that happened. First of all, it was being in the library and finding that of all the pieces of information, the only one that really sat well with her was homeopathy. And then my dad, who honestly was not the kind of, is a little bit more now, but still not the kind of man to look for signs or to feel guided or to even have that terminology, he was a market trader. He had a stall in the market selling clothes, and opposite him one day was a bookstall, and he was in the same market stall, every week, and never had there been this bookstall ever. It was always another clothes store. And this one week there was a bookstore, and it was the week that my mum had been at the library. And he said there was this book. And also, my dad is like from Morocco, born in the 40s. He's not one to look at an English bookstall and go and pick up. He's not someone that like mooches around a bookshop, he's just not that person. So he said that this book was jumping out at him, this red cover. And he walked out of his stall and went over and saw the title of the book was literally How to Treat Arthritis with Homeopathy. And he took it home. And we can't find that book now. My mom's sure that was the title. We've looked for it since and can't find it. And she doesn't know, where it is. We can't find the thing online or anything. But they both remembered this book really vividly. And he took it home to my mom, and he said, that's our decision. But in the 80s, it was really, the boom, the time of capitalism, things that really, it was a time for big business, and everything within the medical world was really having, not in my version of events, but in the version of events of the medical world, advancing a lot. And so to say to a pediatrician who was a very well-respected pediatrician, she was actually known as the top pediatric rheumatologist in the country. And we have, for anyone listening who doesn't know how the British medical system works, we are very fortunate that we have something called the NHS, the National Health Service. We pay for it from our taxes. We don't pay for medical care. Obviously, that comes with a lot of problems in itself, because the hospitals are run down and old, and there's not enough money to well, that's another story altogether, right? But yeah, because there probably is enough money, it's just not going to the right places. But there is private healthcare if you can afford it. And back in those days, there was no way my parents, now they have, like you guys have got private healthcare schemes where you pay per month. And we didn't have that then. There was no one we knew had private healthcare. We just have, so any private, all doctors in the UK have, even if they've got private practice, they practice in the NHS as well. And we happened to be nearest to the hospital that had a rheumatology clinic where this pediatrician was based. And she was this imposing, authoritative figure. And she, she used to say to me, she'd said to my mum on numerous occasions, "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Vaknine. Your child's future will rest on this, and don't fall for any of that taboo nonsense." They would literally tell her she was being a bad mother. So now, as a mother, even with all my experience, I cannot imagine having your child diagnosed with a lifelong chronic disease, having all these doctors sitting around you telling you you're going to ruin her life and not listen to them. Like, how strong has she got to be? And when you look at her, you wouldn't even think that, but she does. She just has that access to intuition. And that's all it was.
Wow. Yeah, that's remarkable. I'm so curious because there seems to be some in my research, psychic abilities seem to have a genetic component to them, and intuition, like how strongly you get the messages is perhaps part of that. Do you feel like you have that same strong guidance system?
Yes, I was really fortunate, like I said, that my grandparents were spiritualists. And so from a young age, as you know, like I said, I was with spiritual healers, and they would be talking to me about what they were doing and connecting with spirit. And so it wasn't unusual for me. I think if you come from a background where that stuff's seen as taboo and it's dangerous and it takes you a lot longer to open up to any natural gift you might have. And so I remember my grandmother had a pain in her back. I was 7 years old, and her back was really hurting her. And I just said, well, let me put my hands on you, because that's what I had seen, right? And I did. And she had been a spiritualist. And so she was like, whoa, there's a lot of heat coming out of you. There's a lot of power coming out here. And she said, you're a healer, and do you know where you're channeling this from? And I didn't, but I always was visited by guides. I always knew certain guides and certain spirits that were around me, and always had access to that, even when I didn't understand it. I also never had a fear of death at all. It was very bizarre, but I almost welcomed it, not in a kind of sadistic way, but I had no problem if this illness ended up making me go to the next place. It didn't faze me. So yes, I did, but it only developed with age. And after my grandmother died when I was 20, that was when I had my first real deep, very kind of poignant experience, literally the week after she died. And then my mum took me to the spiritualist circle to try and help me figure out what it was and develop it. And then the actual intuition has come. I think that's a practice. You can learn how to develop your intuition. I've spoken about this with, Jen. I've got a podcast episode with her, Jennifer Finley. She's really, great on intuition. She's a great intuition coach, actually. So I did a podcast episode with her, and we went into detail about that. But yeah, like developing my intuition has been a practice, and again, part of my divine feminine practice, really tapping into that sacred gift of the feminine, which is intuition.
Yeah, really, really cool to hear about. And that book, that red book that existed and now it doesn't exist. Over the last, I haven't been around this stuff as long as you. And actually, like my parents my dad was a scientist. Like I grew up as a materialist, like 3D is it kind of thing. So only in the last decade or so have I done this exploration into the, all the rest of the dimensions. But now at this point, with this podcast and all that, all these crazy occurrences, like nothing really surprises me. But I do
Yeah.
love those moments where like this magical bookstore just appears at the right place in the right time with a bright red like flag, like, hey, look over here. And then it's gone out of this reality. And it's like, wow. Um, Actually, just yesterday, one of the things that I learned from my interview was that there's this, let's call it like a department of spiritual beings that once they reach a certain level of advancement, they can volunteer to help orchestrate synchronicities for people on Earth. Like if you want a thing and somebody else wants a thing, they like have to figure out how their lives are going to intersect together to
Oh my
help
God,
them
I
get
love
that
that.
thing. And I just like thinking about like there's like a whole team up there like trying to manage
Right.
like synchronicities. Um, but sometimes it's like weird and off balancing, but still really fun. When you have one of these crazy um, signs from
Had
the
they
universe.
not both have kind of corroborated the story, I would just think that my mum was in a really difficult place and a lot was going on, and maybe there was some truth to it, but maybe not. But yeah, no, they both swear by this red book that just appeared.
Hmm. Do you have any personal favorite synchronicities that have happened to you?
Oh my goodness, you're putting me on the spot now. I need to get better with these. I'll have to think about that. There are many. Oh well, I'll tell you the story about how I met my husband. That's a great one.
I knew you were going to say that. That's so funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, please.
So we actually went to school together. We were in high school together for 5 years in the same class. We were never friends. And then left school. 10 years later, I was doing a car boot sale. I don't think you guys have got car boots, like a flea market, but everyone takes all their old crap, puts it in the boot of the trunk of their car. And it's a really common thing here all around the country. Sunday mornings, car boot sales. You show up really early, you pay like £10 to get in with your car, and then you put out a trestle table and you just put all your old crap on it, and people come buy it. And I used to do these all the time. Me and my friends used to find it really fun in the summer. We
Yeah.
just sell all our clothes that we didn't want anymore and make like maybe 50, if we were lucky, £100, and go and buy some new clothes. And you literally have to sell everything for 50p a pound. And anyway, my mum and I had decided we were going to do a car boot sale, and I had just come out of a serious relationship where I was very nearly engaged, bought the ring and everything, and I realized it wasn't right, and I had to end it. And I was adamant that I was going to be single and really focus more on my healing. I still hadn't gone into remission yet. I was deep in my journey. I was deeply connected to holistic healing, but I hadn't fully got there yet. And so we had planned to do this car boot sale. We packed the car up the night before. The car's full of stuff. And my mum and I are both those annoying morning people. Once we're up in the morning, we're up. We're planners, we're organizers. We're both very much like that. We want to get everything organized ahead of time. So when we woke up in the morning and it wasn't raining, there was absolutely no reason for us to not want to go. And we packed the car the night before. It was completely out of character for us to go, yeah, I just can't be bothered. Let's go back to bed. We'll do it another time. It could not have been more out of character, because the thought of unpacking the car, my mum would have gone, no, don't be ridiculous. We're up. We've packed the car, means we've got to unpack the car and pack it again next week. It was so out of character. And yet I didn't feel it being out of character. Neither of us argued it. We were like, let's go back to bed. Wasn't raining, nothing. The next opportunity we had to do it was 3 weeks after that. That week we go, I turn up, I'm standing there. It's a nice summer's day, selling my stuff. And I go over, my good friend of mine also was doing car boot sale that day, and she needed to take her daughter to the toilet. So she called me and said, can you come? She was on the other side of the field. Can you come over and watch my stall while I take her? I said, sure. So I walk across, And I see this guy that I used to go to school with selling t-shirts. And he said, "Oh, Lauren Vaknine from school. Wow, how are you?" He goes, "You know who's coming to see me right now? Daniel. Do you remember Daniel?" And I was like, "Whoa, yeah, Daniel was in my class." I said, "Oh, I've got to go and help my friend with her stool, and then I'll come back on the way back." And I went back, and this guy, Daniel, was there, who I'd been to school with. And I had seen him a handful of times. We grew up in the same area over the years, maybe, 4 or 5 times since we'd left school in a pub, or we were once away like in the same, went on the same vacation till we were all in the same place. And it was, "Hi, how are you?" That kind of thing. And he, yeah, it was, and he just literally came to bring his friend coffee because it was a Sunday morning, and my husband is weird like that. When sleeping, needs to be doing something. Actually, he's much better with that now, but at the time, that obviously served me. And he was really interested in everything I was up to. I'd just written my book, and I yeah, he sent me a message afterwards and said, "Do you fancy going for a coffee?" And I was really in the stage of, I'm just going to be single, but he made it sound really casual. So I said, "Sure, we'll go for a coffee." And I just think that is the deepest, most unbelievable synchronicity of my life. But I know that had I not have gone that week, we would have met another time. Those spirits you were talking about, that department would have found a way, because we were meant to end up together. It was exactly 10 years after leaving school. And we've now been married 10 years. We've been together 13 years, but we've been married 10 years.
Wow. Did you have any sense, because looking back, you have the perspective when you knew each other in school, was there ever like a sense of connectedness or a premonition of what might come?
No, I did not like him. He was the boy that used humor to make people like him. And he was in the popular crowd, but he was like the funny, popular kid who would, tease girls. And he was not what I wanted to be around at all. I had no inclination at all. He would have been one of the last people from school that I could have. So no, that's funny, isn't it? Because there was never any intuition around that. And even when, we went on the date, I still came away until the third date. It was only on the third date when he cooked for me and I was at his house and I was able to truly see him. And then I knew I was going to end up with him.
Oh, you knew on the third date?
Yeah, the first date and second date, I still wasn't into it. I was like, "Oh, I don't really have any attraction to him. I don't. My mum kept saying, "Please go out with him again. He seems really nice. Give him a chance. Give him a chance." And yeah.
Did you tell him right away?
On the third date.
On the third date, were you like, "Oh, no, I'm going to be with you"?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I'd made a promise to myself that, because I'd done this thing where I'd go on a few dates with someone and it became a relationship very quickly. Well, there weren't even dates, it was just a relationship. And I wanted to date. And I said to him, "Right, we can do this, but I want to date. I want to actually get to know you before there's any talk of any relationship." And it was really actually challenging because once I met him at that car boot sale, a flare-up started and I was really not doing really well. And we went on the first date and I was kind of okay, but between the first and second date there were 3 weeks because I couldn't really walk very well and I was in a lot of pain. And he kept calling me on his lunch hour to see how he was. I kind of explained the situation. And my mum was like, "He sounds so nice. He's calling you on his lunch hour to see if you're okay. Go out with him." And I went out with him, but so acutely aware of the fact that, I was probably limping and that's really difficult for a young girl, young woman. I was 26, going into dating someone. So there were many challenges around, the illness and dating and romance and stuff. But yeah, he was amazing about all of it, still is. And we've evolved together since then.
There's so many parallels between your story and how I met Heidi, my wife.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to date me, but she kept getting signs that she was supposed to. So we it's kind of similar. We were living in Ubud in Bali, which you may know is like a small-ish community of expats.
Well, they've just opened up, and not just, but they've got an incredible democratic school there. Is it democratic or like a very conscious, alternative to education?
Like an unschooling type of thing.
Yeah, but with it like an actual school that does that sort of approach.
I know of the green school there. We went and toured the green school, which is pretty cool. But
it's amazing.
We basically had like hundreds of friends in common, and we were at the same events for years without ever noticing each other until the time was right. Until I got out of my relationship, she got out of hers, and we were like both single and just dating for the first time in a decade, each of us. And then we met, and then she got the sign that she's supposed to ask me out, and I was that was the first time I was casually dating in my whole life. Very similar. I was like casually dating 3 or 4 people at the time, and everyone sort of knew that, like, if you want a relationship, don't date Derek because he's just and she was like,
you're one of those guys.
I really don't want to do this. And she still talks about it. And she's like, but I had to, because she follows her guidance system pretty well. And it was like pretty, it wasn't long before we got pregnant, like a lot of like events happened really quickly.
Wow.
Which just crazy synchronicities that led us to be in the same place at the same time. And so fun.
There's loads. I'm sure I can think of loads more if I should probably write them all down at some point.
So we've got a few more minutes here. Maybe we schedule another interview sometime to have you back on about like the future of medicine and like what's coming, because I'm really interested in both just like visioning the future and then making it happen. But I wanted to give you a chance to talk about anything that's come up for you that you wanted to make sure we hit on in this episode before we finish. Anything I haven't asked you about that you think is important to touch on?
I mean, we can talk about the future of medicine. It's something that's been coming up a lot. And, as you know, everything is energy and resonance. So when something comes up, it starts coming up a lot, is nervous system regulation. And it's something that I'm spending a lot of time coaching on and teaching on, as well as with my own healing. So I don't know if you want to go into that at all.
Yeah, let's talk about nervous system regulation. It hasn't come up much for me, but if you're perceiving it, it's probably like affecting people all over the world, right? Or people are becoming aware, perhaps, that it's something that they can actively pay attention to and work on. But what are we talking about here when we say that nervous system regulation?
So I think what's happening is, and I literally just today posted a video on my Instagram that people I've got so many comments on, because it's all about how we have evolved as humans since our hunter-gatherer days. And about 50,000 years ago, we grew this part of the brain called the neocortex, which allows for problem solving and logic and all that great stuff. But the truth is that since we evolved that part of the brain, it hasn't actually evolved much since then. In terms of how we manage stress and our stress responses, it's all still the same. So if we encounter stress, the brain and the body still react in the same way they would as when we were hunter-gatherers, right? So all the same processes take place. So when you were a hunter-gatherer, were faced with a predator when you were out hunting or foraging, a whole bunch of processes would take place, right? Your bowels and bladder empty to make you lighter on your feet. Your blood thickens so that you don't bleed out if the animal bites into you. Chemicals flood your body so that you taste really bad if the animal bites into you. This whole bunch of stuff. You get a rise in cortisol and adrenaline, all the things that are going to enable you to run. So the sad thing is that these exact same things are happening to you because your email inbox is too full, or because you didn't get the kids to school on time that day and everyone's screaming and shouting and not able to cope with the stress, or whatever it might be. Insert the blank for, fill in the blank for whatever it is for you. But the same things are happening. So what's happening is, I call them micro stressors. So we're encountering these micro stressors all throughout the day, every day. So whereas our hunter-gatherers would have this kind of big shock every so often, they weren't dealing with micro stressors. Everyone in the tribe had their role. There was nothing beyond that role, right? You either are the hunter, or you prepare food, or, you know, you forage, or you're with your baby. And that's, you know, kind of it. And now we have to be the parent and the business owner and the teacher and the cleaner and the cook and the chauffeur and the forager and the hunter, depending on your lifestyle, and all these things. And our nervous systems are just going, whoa, that is too much. I am going to shut down because I can't deal with it. So what's happening is we're all looking for diagnoses and labels to make us feel okay with the fact that we can't cope. When actually, maybe it's not that something's wrong with our brains. Maybe it's that our brains have not yet evolved to manage the amount of stress and overwhelm and doing that is required of us to survive in 2023. Our brains literally have not evolved to manage it. So we're diagnosing everyone with a whole range of conditions that are, maybe we're just burnt out. Maybe our brains just can't cope. There's this statistic that we take in more information in one day now than a person in the 1700s took in their entire lives. Like, we take a moment to let that integrate. And there is more information, there has been more information distributed and readily available between the years of 2003 to today than was ever distributed and available in the whole history of human civilization before 2003. And we're meant to just cope with that. Our brains are meant, mad, right? And we're meant to just be like, okay, let's keep going and smile about it and be fine. And actually, we're not fine. We are all screaming for a break. And the nervous system regulation comes in because our nervous systems are dysregulated by the amount of doing is required of us, and the amount of information in our brains and the amount of overwhelm we are experiencing. And both men and women are experiencing it equally. We are experiencing it in very different ways, I think, but it is intense. So the nervous system is in this state of fight and flight the whole time. We are constantly in the sympathetic nervous state, where our MO really should be to operate from the parasympathetic, which is, you know, the autonomic nervous system has these states to keep us in. And that sympathetic nervous system is there for the sole purpose of keeping us safe. So it's evolved to be there from when we were hunter-gatherers. Like, if there is an emergency, if there is something we need to worry about, then these things kick in to enable us to be able to manage that situation effectively. We don't need it to be like that all the time now, but we are. And then, so that's the body. And then the brain is constantly in the beta brainwave state, and we should be bringing it back down to alpha. So all these things, we can't change society. We can make choices, actually. And I think we can fight back against the level of doing that's expected of us, and we can create our own normal around that in some way. But we can also do really simple practices like breath work. Breath work instantly takes you down from beta to alpha. Within 2 minutes, you can get there. You can activate the vagus nerve by all sorts of things. And I'm a big fan of health tech. So I use something called the Sensate, which basically uses infrasonic waves to vibrate. You put it on your chest, on your sternum, and it sends infrasonic vibrations to activate the nervous system in order to to activate the vagus nerve in order to calm the autonomic nervous system. I also use this. I don't know if you've come across the Healy.
Yeah, we've got one around here somewhere.
Oh, you got a Healy? Awesome. Yeah, so I run the nervous system program on there pretty much daily. So yeah, that's basically what's been coming up for me. And I noticed that you mentioned the festival that I was at on the weekend, and I did two exact same talks one on one day and one on the other, both about nervous system regulation. And they were full, I mean, packed, just loads of people under the stretch tent around, like, because people saw on the schedule nervous system regulation. And I think they just thought, yeah, I need that because I'm so stressed and I need someone to tell me what to do. And I think we're all just completely broken from it.
Yeah, I have this feeling sometimes later in the afternoon, I'm like, oh, I'm full. Like I can't take in anything more inputs. I'm like, my eyes are going to pop out and I'm just going to shut down. So yeah,
Right.
it's actually over the last month, I've just like really been leaning into just not doing things and just kind of,
Yeah.
that just like, maybe I'll just wander into this room and see if anybody needs help with anything, kind of like just casually going
Yeah.
around.
And I think what's really cool about now, from the other perspective, is that many of us are working for ourselves now, working from home, and we can actually create those hours and create our own boundaries around that. And that's what I meant by there is stuff we can do to counter it a little bit, or to mitigate it a little bit. Obviously, if you're in a 9 to 5, that's harder. And if you're a really low income family and you've got to go out and work, night shifts, and you don't have a choice, and then you're with the kids in the day or whatever it is, there are people who obviously cannot do that. But there are many opportunities popping up now for us to create our own businesses and make our own hours and work from wherever we want. And I'm really passionate about helping people step into that role, the entrepreneur role, like the freedom. I think we all need that. Very few people actually feel like they have any freedom or autonomy in life. And I think we need to just regain that and really step into that sovereignty.
And then when you get to be an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, if I work more, I could
Right.
have another business. It's like, oh, but there's
It's never ending, right? And then there's got to be a balance, and that's so hard because then opportunities start coming your way, and that's a whole nother podcast conversation.
Well, this was fun. Yeah, I learned a lot, and you have these moments where you just like list out, like when you're talking about what's in your medicine cabinet, where you're just like boom, 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 and I was like, oh, this is all great stuff. Like, and then the conversation would keep going. But so it's very clear, Lauren, that you are so well researched and prepared and practiced. I'm just appreciating that side of your expertise, but really, I just enjoyed our conversations and hearing your stories and your perspective. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I actually have, just based on what you just said, I recently made a reel on Instagram, if anyone's interested, about the top products that I use for my kids. I made another one about like the top products I take on holiday for my kids, but also for us. So I always post stuff like that is that easy access guide to what is in my medicine cabinet, what things do I have at my disposal. So if anyone is interested in that.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. Yeah, very, very helpful stuff. So, all right. Tell us where can people find you online and connect with you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at Lauren Vaknine, which is VAKNINE. My website, laurenvaknine.co.uk. My podcast, Reconditioned with Lauren Vaknine. And I've got a YouTube channel as well. I'm everywhere. You can find me pretty much anywhere. I don't know when this is being released, but I've got a little free offering coming out starting on the 2nd of October. So all my offerings are on my website, and I try to do quite a bit of free stuff. My website is full of free resources, from recipes and articles to the podcast episodes, and loads of stuff if you're looking for advice on certain things, or healthier versions of some of our favorite recipes. My website has kind of all of that for you. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
All right, we will talk soon.